Previously, I've been primarily doing cold readings from the book of Isaiah, King James Version, and it has quickly struck me that this is not a book for cold reading. Uh, so, with that said, I have perused Isaiah 19 and formed a little more concrete interpretation or opinion, if you will, of what it's talking about. But with the standard disclaimers, I'm not a preacher or any kind of ordained clergyman. I am simply a Christian and a sinner and a guy from Alabama. But Isaiah chapter 19, KJV, as is my wont, begins with, oddly enough, verse 1. The burden of Egypt. Behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. If we think about what is Egypt, um, even today it's thought of as the land of the pharaohs and the great kings and such, with the bunch of weird gods that, aka idols. And so it was back then. So verse 2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And if you think about Egypt fighting kingdom against kingdom, uh, well, Egypt is its own sovereign country now, but in the good old days of the Old Testament, uh, pretty much a king was whatever he could claim kingship over. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. Familiar being like the sorcery type familiar, or uh, I don't know the best way to describe it if you aren't familiar, pardon the pun, with the concept of a familiar, but it's basically a servant enthralled by sorcery of some sort. Uh, so to them that have familiar spirits, they're, claiming mastership of a familiar. And to the wizards and to the charmers, and all that's kind of in the same spectrum. I hate to overuse that word, but of witchcraft, more or less. Because you can divide witchcraft into all kinds of things like soothsayers, clairvoyants, telekinetics, psychics, and so on and so on. But continuing on. And they shall seek to the idols, to the charmers, to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord of hosts. And the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up. Now that's, if you're talking about the river in Egypt, you're talking about the Nile uh, and its associated tributaries, such as the Green Nile and the White Nile, and a bunch of other little uh, smaller tributaries. And the Nile is, I mean, it's the longest river in the world, but it has a very important uh, rhythm, if you will, cycle uh, that allows it to support civilization, particularly in the ancient times. Actually, they made, or they still make, a device called a Nilometer to measure the swelling and draining of the Nile through the air. Anyway, the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up. That's something that we're currently seeing. Saw something about the Euphrates earlier, and not to get off the topic, but you might remember from Western Civ that the Tigris, and Euphrates River formed the boundaries of Mesopotamia, which is seen as the birthplace of civilization, kind of, if I can remember my Western Civ. But continuing on. And they shall turn the rivers far away, and the brooks of defense shall be emptied and dried up. The reeds and flags shall wither. The paper reeds by the brooks, by the mouth of the brooks, and everything sown by the brooks shall wither, be driven away, and be no more. The fishers shall also shall mourn, of course, because there's no river, there can be no fish. And all they that cast angle into the brooks shall lament, and they that spread nets upon the waters shall languish. They have nothing to do, they languish. Moreover, they that work in fine flax, and they that weave networks, net weavers, or weaving of any sort really, is dependent on the flax, which is made from a plant. So without the river, all of these things are just impossible. So all of these people are going to be unable to use their talents and to ply their trades. That goes for the fishers, that goes for the seamstresses, farmers, anybody that has a use of agriculture, plant life, sea life, or freshwater fish perhaps, but also, as it says, the seas as well. And they shall be broken in the purposes thereof, all that make sluices, and ponds for fish, which is something that people do with rivers. Like here in Alabama, we've got Lake Martin and Lake Jordan, and they make what they call oxbows out of them to make little lakes of water that's more calm and able to be fished and such more easily. But without that source, if it, the river dries up, so will the lakes, or ponds, sluices, that they make for it. Verse 11. Surely the princes of Zoan are fools. I don't know what Zoan is, but context should reveal it. Surely the princes of Zoan are fools. The counsel of the wise counselors of Pharaoh is become brutish. How say ye unto Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Where are they? Where are thy wise men? And let them tell thee now, and let them know what the Lord of hosts hath purposed upon Egypt. The princes of Zoan are become fools. The princes of Noph are deceived. They have also seduced Egypt, even that they are the stay of the tribes thereof. Now, my Jewish history isn't what it should be or could be or what I'd like it to be, but more on that in a minute too. Verse 14. The Lord hath mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, and they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. Neither shall there be any work for Egypt, which the head or tail, branch or rush may do, which is kind of the essence of the Nile drying up. Sorry, I gotta do it. Being denied the Nile. Sorry, that was terrible. Verse 16. In that day shall Egypt be like unto women, and it shall be afraid and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he shaketh over it. Don't hate me, I didn't write the Bible, but the idea is that the strong, tough men shall be timid and weak and scared like women. You know, oh no, there's a mouse. I better freak out. Find somebody to get rid of it. Hire an exterminator to kill the spider, and so on. And the land of Judah shall be a terror unto Egypt. Everyone that maketh mention thereof shall be afraid in himself, because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he hath determined against it. Shall be afraid in himself, and doubting, and kind of like existential crisis, I would imagine, because you've heard all of this stuff being said, but you've been shaking it off for so long, but then suddenly start to see the signs, and it's becoming evident that you might be wrong after all. You not being anyone in particular, but being people that don't subscribe to the idea of God. In that day, this is verse 18, in that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, and swear to the Lord of hosts. One shall be called the city of destruction. In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. And it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt, for they shall cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors, and he shall send them a Savior, and a great one, and he shall deliver them. And the Lord shall be known to Egypt, and the Egyptians shall know the Lord in that day, and shall do sacrifice and oblation. Yea, they shall vow a vow unto the Lord and perform it. And the Lord shall smite Egypt. He shall smite and heal it. And they shall return even to the Lord, and he shall be entreated of them and shall heal them. Which is sometimes it's necessary to destroy something and rebuild it. And that's what I believe is being referred to here. Bearing in mind that Egypt is not this spot on our current day maps, but more like, I don't know, I want to say continent, but more than just a country. I mean, a vast distance. That the idea of, global travel, everything was pretty much in a very small region of the world. Yet things in Egypt were very great. Anyway, verse 23. In that day that shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria. And the Assyrian shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptian into Assyria, and the Egyptians shall serve with the Assyrians. And a trade route, basically. In that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance. I don't speak with any kind of, as I've already mentioned, authority as a pastor or anything like that. But this idea of the third, in that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria. Israel, the people of Israel, the Jewish people, will be in Egypt and Assyria. And for reference, Assyria is today part of Iraq and Turkey, if I'm not mistaken. So these geographic regions that are mentioned, such as Egypt and Assyria, they don't apply just, one-to-one to the map. Israel either, for that matter. In particular, Israel. And that's the chapter, but to lay some emphasis on some key points there. The waters fail from the sea, the river shall be wasted and dried up. And that's going to devastate civilization there, because what is Egypt if not a desert? Except for the parts that are the part not only of Egypt, but many countries, Sudan and such, are fed by the Nile. And of course you got the Nile Delta, and you've got silt. Jeez. In any case, there's a reference to a Savior and Messiah, a great one. There's a reference to the rivers drying up. There's a reference to people having nothing to do, languishing. Now, this transition from the scripture portion into musing, basically, to how this applies to my life and to modern life, everybody that's living today. Um, we've all heard about the issues with automation and AI rendering people useless. Their talents are no longer needed, uh, except for a very select few. We've heard of the rivers drying up, and this is nothing new, but we hear people crying that this is the end times. But this is not the first time that that's been, posited. Far from it. Uh, but one thing we can say for certain is that we are closer to the end times, because that's how time works. As you progress through it, you get closer to the end of it as we know it. I can't count the number of videos and such that I've watched, not with interest, about end times and so on and so on, how AI is going to be the end of man and what have you. And I don't really think that's inaccurate, but it doesn't bother me, because I believe it's in Matthew that Jesus said that no man can predict the hour, no man will know the hour, but to remain vigilant, be ready at all times. But be wary of deception, because the world is given to Satan. I mean, the world is evil, and we endure a life surrounded by evil, and I think it was Jesus that said, be in the world, but not of the world. And that's what separates you from falling, for being judged and held accountable for all of the evil that you've done or thought and everything else. Is that last chance for salvation. But this is what I do think is a good indication that we're approaching the end, is how ubiquitous Christianity or Judaism as well. I mean, you can't claim ignorance but for so long. I mean, all these so-called uncontacted tribes and such have all been contacted. The internet literally encompasses the globe via satellites. And sure, there may be a few holdouts that have never experienced religion, or at least Abrahamic religion, Judaism, which is its own special thing, Christianity, which is an extension of Judaism. I mean, throughout the Old Testament, even the Torah, as far as I know, I don't have an actual copy of the Torah, but in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, there's reference to Christ, even in Genesis. I can't quote the exact verse or point directly to it. Um, Book of Daniel, of course, but that's not in the first 5. Uh, it's very explicit about when the last age is going to, be the last age, the fourth kingdom, of which we are a part of now, the remnant of the Holy Roman Empire. So with Revelation has a lot of prophecy that is come true, a new world order, a global currency, and promise of global safety. But I want to also kind of put that caveat that we had that same global safety with the rise of nuclear weapons. Everybody was safe because everybody was so dangerous. That mutually assured destruction guaranteed the safety of everybody. Yet war continued, and war continues to this day in the Mideast. And that too is prophesied. So it's fair to say that I subscribe to the belief that we are at the very end, the last percentage or two of time before the reckoning, time of rapture, tribulation, and ultimately judgment. Where Satan and the lesser demons associated with will no longer have their free reign to corrupt and pervert the earth as it has been corrupted and perverted. The natural order usurped, and how we've tried to elevate ourselves yet again to the level of godship, to tinker with the gift that only God can give, which is life. And we're even making bastardized abominations of life to power certain things. I'm not trying to get into like a genetic engineering type thing, but there's a lot of issues I have with exploiting life. For example, horseshoe crabs that are held in a state of permanent bloodletting because they have interesting blood. So these poor creatures are in laboratories just being forced to live. And I'm sure they would rather just die than instead be stuck in a almost immobile, if not totally immobile position, being drained of their blood every, as much as they can tolerate. And I'm sure that's only the tip of the iceberg. I would not be at all surprised if that extends to humans. I'm sure it does, because I'm sure it has. There's plenty of issues that are documented in history where humans were made to be a commodity. Slavery is just one example. I mean, American slavery. Uh, but, the whole thing with the Germans in World War II, or I should say the Nazis. And so on and so on. So I do think we're at the end of times, and therefore it's important to try to reach as many people with this kind of message. But they don't need to fear this. They need to look forward to it. That's what rapture means. The definition of the word rapture is extreme joy. But if you hear the rapture happening and everybody disappearing, it sounds scary from the way we've had it portrayed to us. But rapture is not always spelled with a capital R, as in the rapture, but rapture is something we experience when we have no better word to express extreme joy. Tribulation, on the other hand, is a challenge. And of course, ultimately, good conquering evil, which that's the way it always works. But I wanted to muse just a little bit more on made for kids or made for children content, and why I don't flag any of my content as made for, I can't remember if it says kids or children, but the thing about being a kid or child is you still have an inherent innocence, and these kind of messages about God and sin and so on and so on don't apply to children, to the innocent, as Jesus himself remarked loosely on, but I can't think of the verse. I'm sure it's in Matthew somewhere, but how he talks about how blessed are the children. So if you are in fact a kid, a child that doesn't know right from wrong, there's no concept of good and evil, this kind of stuff isn't necessary for you. The same applies to those that don't have a mental development to basically where they remain innocent, remain children. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're able to click on a video or whatever, then you clearly have enough mental capacity to make decisions and understand that there's consequences or rewards from decisions. So despite your age, you may or may not be a child or a kid. I guess it's kind of the gist of the thought I'm trying to relay. In any case, that's going to conclude Isaiah 20. And sorry for the late God hour. I had a very early work hour. Be back in the morning with a good, fresh uh, first hour of the day, God hour, as it is intended. That's it. God bless you. Have a great day. See you soon. And War Eagle.